Hi, I'm Margie Holmes. Today's topic is about male sexuality. We've had varying questions for you on the subject, so let's begin. Anonymous 1. I know coming too quickly happens. I was just wondering, does a man ever come too late? Yes, Anonymous 1. Actually, a man does or can, and it's called inhibited or delayed ejaculation, which is a man's inability for or that he has persistent difficulty in achieving orgasm despite typical sexual desire and typical sexual stimulation. In other words, even if most men will come with the kind of stimulation that this man has, he cannot have an orgasm even after prolonged intercourse. Prolonged intercourse will be anything from 30 to 45 minutes of having sex. Now, I know this sounds like an answer to every girl's dream, but actually it isn't, let me tell you, because 45 minutes of unrelenting thrusting actually hurts a lot. And I know this may also sound like the answer to every man's dream, but again, it isn't, because what happens is what the man may suffer from is priapism, which is potentially painful and is a medical condition. And what it means is that the erect penis does not return to its flaccid state despite the fact that you have no physical and psychological stimulation within 4 hours. In fact, research has shown that in case priapism lasts beyond 4 hours, it is possible that your nerves running across your penis may be damaged. So guys, if you find that you have this problem, this situation, rush to the emergency room right away, okay? Now, Anonymous 2 says, I am a married man in my mid-30s. I have a very healthy sex drive. I notice that as I get older, my sexual energies escalate. Before, I was not interested in young girls, but now I find myself ogling at pretty young things, especially those with ample bosoms and or a lovely butt. By young, I mean late teens and early 20s. My friend says that this is a sign of getting old, and I tend to agree with her. But I would like to know from you if that is true. Do men really gravitate to desiring young women as they get older? And why? Is it a sign that a man is entering midlife crisis? Anyway, following the traditional setup that a man likes a woman to be younger, as you get older, the pool of younger women becomes larger and larger, right? So if you were 17 and you were interested in a 15-year-old woman, that would be perfectly okay, right? However, as you get older and older until you get to your mid-30s, you may still be interested in 15-year-old women, and why not? Especially 15-year-old women who have ample bosoms and who have nice butts. I remember my husband used to say, a butt so tight that it can crack walnuts. Pretty good expression, right? It's perfectly understandable if you are interested and find these same women attractive. Who wouldn't, okay? Now, however, if the reasons you find young women attractive to the point that you want to run after them the way you did when you were 17, makes things a little different. It means that your tastes haven't changed. If at 17 you find a woman who talks about tweeting while she's chewing her bubble gum or talks about rock stars, that is perfectly okay. However, if you're 17 and you still find it entrancing for a woman to chew gum while she talks about her latest crush, I mean, there's something a little bit weird there. That is still not the midlife crisis. The midlife crisis is not realizing that, you seem to have a problem, right? It is not that the age gap is very wide, but the fact that you don't think it's a problem, that your tastes have not changed, even now that you are 20 years older from where you were then, right? I mean, this is something that can be a problem. And then we have some other questions or comments. Oliver Palumbarit asks, why are males more visual when it comes to sex? Sociobiologists have a very clear example of this, because what a sociobiologist says is that men have different sexual feelings than women do, and this is not a function of learning, it is not a function of experience, but because men are hardwired differently from women. And what is it? A woman finds someone sexually attractive if this man she thinks will be a good father, will contribute good genes for her kids. Whereas a man's view is, I would like to sleep with as many women as I can, because the more women I sleep with, the more chances I have of impregnating them and therefore making sure my genes go on to the next generation. If you're interested in this, Richard Dawkins wrote a fabulous book called The Selfish Gene, and you will see how they explain scientifically why men seem to want to impregnate as many women as possible. Okay, so if a man wants to impregnate as many women as possible, even if unconsciously, of course, if he will be turned on visually, it is much easier, right? Because there are so many more women you can see, as opposed to if a man got turned on simply by being touched. I mean, the only women he would be turned on to are the women at arm's length, right? Or their arm's length. Christine says, I wonder why other men often watch porn videos but then still don't want or insist that their wives do not dirty talk with them the way the porn videos might. Now, your question, Christine, of course consists of two presumptions, but okay lang yan because actually research supports your presumptions. Supports, not really proves, because more studies have to be done before you say ipso facto it really proves this. One, you presume that a lot of men watch porn, and by the way, this has been confirmed by a Canadian study from the University of Toronto. Maybe we'll talk about that more when we talk about porn. Number two, you also presume that there's a difference between a man's expectation from a porn star and a man's expectation from his wife and what the wife does. And also, this has also been backed up by research, many in the States, but let me share research that has been done in the Philippines. This is by Dr. Lando Hocano from the Department of Anthropology in UP. And what he found out is that when men ask for oral sex, their wives get angry and say, bakit mo hinihiling sa akin ito? Anong akala mo sa aking puta? Right? So here you see that the wife has a double standard. You can do that kind of dirty sex with your whore, but not with me. I'm merely quoting, I'm not saying this is the way I talk to my husband, okay? And the men also, if they find a wife, their wife is willing to do all sorts of things, they tend to get angry and get upset because they feel hindi sila yung nauna. In other words, this is the Madonna-prostitute dichotomy, which we've talked about before. You know, na may dalawang klase ng babae sa mundo. Yung isa panrespeto, which is your wife, your mother, etc. At yung isa pangkama. And they want the pangkama to be terrific at sex and the Madonna to be, well, you know, kinda mahinhin, etc., etc. But the problem is, of course, this limits your wives or your girlfriends and their behavior. I mean, how can a Madonna compete with a woman who oohs and ahs, arches her back, and is willing to do raunchy sex? You know, if you want your marriage to work, maybe you can be like the new kind of man who is able to see and appreciate both the Madonna and the prostitute in the same woman. Okay? Tanya M. Garcia asks, can a man have an orgasm without ejaculating? Yes. And this is when you have what is called retrograde ejaculation or a dry orgasm. This means when the semen, which is normally ejaculated via the urethra, so outside the body, is redirected to the urinary bladder. This usually happens for men who have had prostate surgery. However, some people say, especially people who believe in the Tao of sex, say that a man can be trained to have an orgasm even without ejaculating. One of the major proponents of this is Archie King, whom many of you may know, especially if you like going to motels, and why not? Now, Archie King was the first one who opened my mind to the subject, and now I am not betraying a trust because he wants as many people to know about this, and he doesn't mind that people know that it comes from him. Okay? So, what the Tao of Love and Sex, which I was first introduced to by Mr. King many years ago, says that you can train yourself, right, to come, to have an orgasm, even if you don't ejaculate. So I have shared this with men, especially men, older men who have more difficulty having an erection after they have after they ejaculate, right? I have trained them, and men find that they can actually do this. They can have pleasure and hold their ejaculation after 3 or 4 encounters. I don't mean every day, I mean in the span of 1 week, or 1 week or 2 weeks at the most. So what happens then is that the men are more eager for sex, which is always good, especially in a marriage where you have been married a long, long time, and sometimes yung asim ng relasyon, the sexual of the relationship isn't there anymore. This helps a lot. Okay, now from ejaculation and orgasms, let's go to other things, okay? And Christine, what is the difference between being friendly and being flirty? I love this question because this applies not only to married people or people who have had sex for a long time, but it applies to younger men and women who are not yet having sex, no? What is the difference between being flirty and being friendly and being flirtatious? My guideline is always this. If you would act the exact same way to someone you consider a friend, whether or not your partner were there, that is usually being merely friendly. However, if you change your behavior, even an iota, if you would do something differently if your partner were present, that is more likely to be flirtatious. We are almost finished. Let me just focus on the question that is most commonly asked, and that is, can you guess? The greater desire for sexual variety that men seem to have over women. Dale Custodio asks, are men really more prone to infidelity than women? Is this genetics or socialization, or is it something else? Annie Crespo also asks, are men really polygamous in the sense that even though they are already married, their instinct is to have sex, even if they have sex with another woman or partner in their life, not their partner in life? Bert Kibuyan asks, is infidelity a matter of nature or nurture? My answer is, Bert and all the others, it seems to be both, right? You ask if it's genetic or a result of experience. The natural tendency seems to be something that is already there. Men do not have to be taught to find many women attractive, even though they love just one woman. Okay? So it's not hardwired in their brains like it seems to be hardwired in women's brains. I love him, he loves me. I'm not interested in other men. Now, I am talking in general, of course, because as you know, there are many, exceptions, okay? So, in addition to that, to the possible hardwiredness of this, of being, in quotes, unfaithful, the other thing is also what you learn through education. For example, your upbringing. If your father fooled around and nothing, bad, he didn't receive any repercussions, well, why shouldn't the guy also feel that he can be unfaithful and fool around, right? Your upbringing makes a very big difference. Some people think something else makes a difference, which is the fear factor. So a man tends to fool around depending on the kind of woman he has. If he fools around, yet he knows that his wife may scream and shout but not leave him for his fooling around, then he will continue to do so. But if he knows that his wife has enough smarts, has enough respect for herself, has enough resources, that he cannot get away with fooling around, that she will leave him if he does, then They tend not to fool around, and this is what some men call the fear factor. You will only not fool around if you are afraid that your wife will leave you. If you do, and of course, if you love her enough so you don't want to leave her. Okay, in closing, I would like to share a joke with you which shows this difference in terms of infidelity. And a lot of people like to call it the Coolidge joke, which maybe I will explain in another show. Now, this is about President Coolidge, US President Coolidge and his wife. And this is an anecdote. When he was president, they were shown a state farm and they went separately to look at the farm. So when Mrs. Coolidge got to the, the poultry section, she said, "Tell me, does a rooster mate once a day?" And the rooster said, "Oh no, Mrs. President, a rooster mates at least a dozen times a day." So Mrs. Coolidge said, "Well, will you please tell my husband that when he gets to this part of the farm?" And so he said, "Yes, ma'am." And so when President Coolidge got to that part of the farm, the tour guide said, "Oh, by the way, Mr. President, your wife told us to tell you that a rooster mates at least a dozen times a day." The president stops and says, "Is it with the same hen every time?" And the tour guide said, "Oh no, Mr. President, it's with a different hen each time." To which the president said, "Well, will you please tell that to my wife?" Anyway, okay, that's it for this week. But what would you like us to talk about next week? Please send in your questions, suggestions, and comments on Facebook. Tweet using the hashtag AskMargie or send an email to askmargie@rappler.com. See you next week.